Hey everyone, today we are in period 1 honors algebra doing this live. Special functions, piecewise, step, and absolute value functions. These are the types of specialty things that you will see. Piecewise is defined as one rule with several formulas. Okay, the formula for each piece of the function is then applied via the domain restriction as specified in the definition of a function. Some of these things you may or may not have seen before, depending on what teacher, or maybe doing a little bit of exploration on your own. But please make sure to copy this down. Once again, too, because this is live, if you want to be on the video, if you've got a question during it and you're not afraid, please ask. Otherwise, I'll ask for questions at the very end so you can kind of maybe put a star around what you might be finding. For the piecewise defined function, okay, so if you take a look, this is what a piecewise looks like. It's mainly one or more functions that have some type of domain restriction on the end. These things being the domain restriction. Okay. So we're only graphing those specific pieces of it or finding those specific items. For each of the following, whenever it gives you f of and it gives you a certain number, what you're trying to do is look for where that number is in your domain, and based on that is which equation you're going to plug it into. Okay. So for instance, if you're looking at letter A, f of -5, you'll want to see in your domain restriction which one has a domain that could include that -5, which x is less than 2 is a perfect example. And then you'll plug -5 into that equation. So since x is less than 2 is a restriction that would include -5, we'll plug that into the 2x plus 3. So then it will be 2 times -5 plus 3, which will give you -7. Okay. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Try letters B and C on your own, and I'm going to put up the answers for you. Take a look and see how you did. On letter B, if you put does not exist, that's totally fine too. It's asking you for f of 8, and if you look at your domain restrictions for each of these, you really don't have one there. For 8, it only goes up to 6. Okay. Now, letter D says the domain of and range of f. I'm going to actually hold off on that until we get a graph, because I feel like the domain we could see, but the range is going to be a little bit difficult. So that's where we want to try and graph our function first. So we have these two equations. I'm just going to write them down here. You don't have to do this because you have a paper in front of you, but I'm going to scroll. This is where, if you're doing this in pen, you might want to think first before you do it in pen. Usually I like to do this type of stuff in pencil. All right, so we've got 2x plus 3 less than 2. I think the first thing that I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to graph 2x plus 3. So I'm going to go up 3 and then up 2 and right 1, or down 2 and right 1. Just getting the slope of my line. And then it says I can only go up to 2. Well, right there I'm at 1. So if I go one more, and I would do an open circle. Okay. If you want to, just throwing this out there, okay, you can, let me see, there it is. You can, if you want to, you can graph the entire line and then be like, oh, this is 2. I'm going to go back and I'm going to erase until then, and then put a circle. That's totally up to you what you want to do. And then there's also a couple other ways to do the next part, the x minus 1. You can also graph the entire thing and then just can't like erase the parts that you don't need. Or you can plug 2 into x minus 1 and 6 into x minus 1 and then just do a connecting the dots type of scenario because it's linear. So what I mean by that is if I plug 2 into x minus 1, I end up with the point 2 comma 1. And if I plug 6 in x minus 1, I'll end up with the point 6 comma 5. So if I plot those two, so 2, 1, and 6, 5, then I could just draw that line. That's one way to do it. You can also, like I said before, you could also go down to where negative 1 is and then just go up and over, up and over, up and over using your slope and then look and see like, okay, I don't need anything below 2, so I'm going to erase it. I don't need anything above 6, so I'm going to erase that. And then you get your answer. So now that we have our graph, okay, this is what we would call piecewise graph. Then we can go back and look and find our domain and range. Domain's going to be fairly simple here. It's going to be, this is going on forever. So this is negative infinity. And if you look, it closes off that circle at 2 and goes the whole entire way until 6. So negative infinity to 6. And then 6 is included. We could have also told that from just the beginning, from what they gave us with our restrictions. Our range, though, is a little bit more difficult to determine. Our range in this case, though, since we have it graphed, is going from negative infinity up until 7. 7 not being included because it's an open circle. All right, questions at all? You think that you could try a problem like this on your own? Okay, you can work with a partner for a little bit. Just a reminder, I'm still recording. But I'd like you to try example number 2, either with somebody at your seat or on your own. I'll put up the answers here too because I'll do it as well, and then I'll go through it all. One. So while they're working, just gonna keep filling in the steps a little bit here, and then this is the type of time of the video where you can always fast forward or rewind, whatever you prefer, in order to get to the solution. On letter C, if you want to round to 2 decimals in order to find out where that number lies, you can. Um, you can make a T-chart if you want. And like, so make a T-chart and then you can make it like maybe 0, 1, 2, 3, and then you'll see that it'll say and then same kind of similar thing here. Make an XY chart and put in -1, put in 0.
A zero. A zero for X.
Yeah, because you'll see that it will dip. It'll actually dip into a V shape instead of just being a straight line.
And so what I just like plug in zero for that, and plug in one, and then just plug in.
Oh, you can start with 2, 2, 3, and then you'll see a little bit of the shape. All right, so if you're working, that's totally fine. Just kind of want your eyes up to make sure that you're on A through C correctly here for the most part. On letter A, okay, 1.6. 1.6 should have been in between -1 and 2, so absolute value of x minus 5. So then your answer -3.4. Letter B, -2.3, that's where 2x minus 3 occurs, so it'll be -7.6. The j of 5 minus 2 pi, you're going to want to plug that into a calculator. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I got approximately -1.28, which then is that x is less than -1. So you're using that 2x minus 3 to get approximately -5.56. Domain and range. Domain, you could easily tell, like, this is from -infinity, and then it has no gaps, and then it's going to go to infinity, which is fine. And if you didn't, that's okay. That's why we draw it. But the range, you can't. So here's what I did in order to graph. Okay. First off, I rewrote this down here just so I had it. 2x minus 3 is in my green. You'll notice the dots correspond to the color of the equation. So 2x minus 3, that's a linear line. I just started at -3 and went down 2 and left 1 because I needed to go backwards with my slope. Put my open circle where my x would have been -1 and then just continued onward from there. The absolute value of x minus 5, that's a little bit different because that's not linear. So when we have something that's not linear, okay, chances are it's going to create some other type of shape. So if you would have done what we did in the previous one, and you just did -1 and plugged it in, and 2 and plugged it in, you would have gotten a straight line across. However, if you also take 0 and 1 into account, okay, and plug those into the absolute value, okay, absolute value always makes a V shape. And in this case, the V just happened to be in between -1 and 2. So I took and made myself a little chart, kind of similar to an XY chart, but I was just kind of doing it in my head. And I plugged in those values in between that were whole numbers. And that's how I ended up with almost like my small mini check mark. Okay? Because once I plug 0 in, it becomes 0, comma -5, and it goes down and then it goes back up. Last thing that you could do then, too, for x squared is also a different shape. That's a U. Um, and it says x is greater than 2. From there, all you really need to do, you create an XY chart for that. And then you could start with 2. So like 2 squared, that's going to be 4. And then 3 squared is going to be 9. And really, that's how I got the point 2 comma 4 with an open circle. And then I put one other point there, 3 comma 9, to give me that closed circle and then finish out. Okay. And then once I have that, then I can look for my range. Okay, a domain, if I didn't know before, this is all real numbers, negative infinity to positive infinity. Range, even though it's open there, it's closed as well. So it goes all the way up to -3, and then with a bracket, and then it stops and it becomes 4 with an open circle to infinity. Okay. Questions at all? Okay. I think today, for the most part, what we're going to be able to do is get to examples 3 and 4. I'm going to have you guys try examples 3 and 4 at your seats, see how well you do. It's just the graphing part because I feel like that is the most difficult. Try those out. I'll put the answers up for you. And then if you have any questions, just let me know. And if you feel like you really know what you're doing, and you want to work backwards, number 5 says write the piecewise function shown on the graph. So you're talking a little bit about there's the piecewise, or there's the function. Can you create the pieces, so to speak? But we can get to that here in a little bit later. So if you're following along with me at home, what I'm having my class do right now is just the numbers 3 and numbers 4. So this is the part where you want to pause the video, try it on your own, and then come back to it and see how well you do. Oh, it says less than. See, did I make mistakes? All right, let's take a look at number 3 here. If I made any mistakes too, you guys call me out because I was going through and I noticed that I made a mistake and tried to correct it. On number 3, okay, the first one, that's an x squared. So that's not linear. So it's going to make a weird shape. It's going to make a U shape. So I'm going to do an XY chart, which you see in green, because that's the type of line that I used. I started at 1. I noticed at first that I was trying to go up, but really I need to go anything that's less than 1. So 1, 0, -1, -2, just a couple points to kind of get the shape. I would suggest if it's linear, 2 points will make that straight line. If it's not linear, then maybe use 3 points whenever you're plotting it. That's how I was able to get that green part. The 1/2 x plus 1/2, between 1 and 4, that's linear. So I showed on here, like, you can create the T chart with 4 points in between, or since it's linear, you can just do the first point and the last point, or you could just graph it using slope and y-intercept. Totally up to you. I showed all 4 points just because it was a half, and I wanted to make sure that I had it correctly. And that's how it ended up going, and you can see it on that line. One thing I want to make note of is it's a closed circle with the green and an open circle with the black, so it's continuous the whole entire way through, which is nice. There's no gaps or no holes in it or anything in example number 3. Okay. Questions at all before I move to number 4? Okay, and then example number 4. I think, yeah, this is probably going to be a good stopping point after this. Example number 4, -3 is linear. It's just a straight line with a slope of 0. So I start that at -2. I noticed at first that I put it at -3, but I messed up and I corrected that. So I started there. It's an open circle, and then it just goes onward to the left. The other one, that's also linear, 3/4 x minus 1/2. I got my first point at -2, -2, and then my other one at 2, 1. Does that look good? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so once that I had that there, then I just plotted it, and then one side was closed, the other side was open. And then last but not least, I have -2x plus 16. So that is also linear. So I just plugged in, it said greater than or equal to 3. I plugged in 3 and 4 because, once I get that slope down, then it should be good. It got me 3, 10, and 4, 8, and then I would just go onward forever in that direction. Questions at all? All right, we'll pick it up at some other point. I'll stop the video here and then